Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Sarah Johnson, and I wanted to make a quick video to introduce myself to you as your instructor because so many times you feel like you're just interfacing with a computer. There's lots of reading materials. This course kind of reveals itself to you as you go. I'm going to try to be better about giving you heads up about what's coming down the pike and maybe trying to clarify some of this stuff. I have been teaching for American Military University for a couple of semesters now, and this is my first time to teach the Psychology of Disaster course. So I have enjoyed the material as I've reviewed it and put it together for you. So let's work together to go through these next 8 weeks so that you can learn information for both your professional and your personal information and use. You guys have done a good job with the first discussion board. It seems like you've gotten in there and learned how this process works. So without further ado, because there's a lot of information that I'd like to touch on to just talk to you about. First, let me just try to maybe wrap my arms around all this for you in this little 10-minute video. The task for the book, I've gotten lots of emails about, are we going to use the book, because I got this text and I'm not seeing it in the reading. The book, we will take certain chapters and apply it to, say, the discussion boards. For example, our discussion board this week, week 2, what I want you to do is basically read chapter 5 out of here and kind of compare the experiences of trauma and the processing of it to what happened with London and what they consider Britain's 9/11, so to speak. And it's more it's better described on the discussion board. So if you'll go there and look at that and use this as a reference. If you haven't yet, I would also recommend reading chapters 1 and 2 out of this. This book is the seminal work of terror management theory, and a lot of the other readings that we refer to that are the PDFs and in the course materials refer back to this book as being the I'm struggling for the word because I don't want to use the wrong word, because I have words that are coming to mind, but I don't want to use those words. It's the seminal work of terror management theory is basically the way we want to say that. So if you haven't taken a look at chapter 1 and 2, you might want to take a look at that. And then this week's discussion board uses chapter 5 as some of the reference material. Enough said, because I'm burning time. Where's my time? Okay, 3 minutes. Okay. One of the things that I can say to you, or I can try to say to you quickly about what happens in chapter 1 and 2 of the terror management theory in that book, it's so fascinating to me, and I wish we were in class because I could just talk to you guys for a long period of time, because there are so many things that go into this. You're talking about your cultural worldview, you're talking about self-esteem, belief systems, your security, this concept called psychological equanimity. It's this concept that we live in a meaningful universe, and then we strive to essentially make our mark in the world, that once our mortality is faced, that our mark will live on. And so it's this quest, and there's some existential things about it that you can get really off into this touchy-feely world about it. But to keep it focused and to bring it back, it's hard to keep it focused because it is so many things. It is your self-esteem, it is your worldview, it is your adjustment, it is your attachment. Even it goes back to that. And it says that all of these things that make up the gestalt of who we are, and I know that we don't have a lot of people who are psych majors, so I won't use a lot of that psychobabble for you, but what I will say is there's a lot of things that are building blocks of who we are that are very important to how we experience disaster or bad things that happen to us. For example, and I don't think this should really be an epiphany for anybody, but someone who is more well-adjusted and has more resources will respond maybe in a better way to a disaster or something that has gone wrong, whether it be a natural or man-made disaster or a terrorist threat or whatever. They will respond in one way because they have certain resources to depend on to process whatever has happened, versus another person who may not be very well adjusted and does not have resources, and whatever disaster has just happened has taken what is so important to them and symbolized their security, and so they can have a completely demoralizing effect on another person. So there are so many variables. One of the things that I continually saw people express was, I would like to be able to understand why people react the way they do. And if we could accomplish that in one course, I would be very rich. Because with people, I won't say all bets are off, but it's more difficult because there are so many variables that happen. We are rapidly going through time, and I hope that I can make more videos for you guys as we go. Oh gosh. Okay. Okay, let me just I made a little chart here, hold on. Okay, you probably won't be able to read this because of my scratch, but let me just go through this. In chapter 5, I tried to go through here and try to just make some notes for us. And in chapter 5, they basically talk about when you have a disaster, that you have a couple of different, you have different reactions that can happen. You can either become bigoted in your response to whatever happened, for example, specifically the 9/11 terrorist attacks, or you can become helpful, and there are ways to get involved and be more part of the solution, and that makes you feel like you are doing something with your locus of control. For example, after 9/11, I think my husband and we volunteered at the North Texas Food Bank, and we were doing things down there. So that was one example of ways that we could do this. Some things that people do, they have shift in their patriotism. Some people are more extreme than, say, they have been in the past, or it gives them a renewed sense of patriotic duty. When things happen and people are trying to make sense of them, people seek validation of their own worldview and their self-esteem. So they're seeking people who are similar to themselves, who validate who you are, who your beliefs are, and reassure you that during this time of fear that everything's going to be okay. So you have different types of responses, and in chapter 5 they talk about proximal responses and distal responses. Example of some of the proximal responses is the psychological, the distractions. People were in denial. They talked about the armadillo effect, how they just kind of curled up into their shell and didn't maybe go beyond their comfort level. Music sales were through the roof because people were just trying to distract themselves. Distal responses, people were looking for comfort. Church attendance was through the roof, and that was not just at home in the U.S., that was around the world. Church attendance, patriotism, national sentiment. They wanted to suppress dissent in that time because, again, remember, we're looking for things that feel good, collectivity, strength, and those kinds of things to reassure ourselves. So these independent responses in this big group have a range of ways that they can react, and that is the challenge, because we're talking about big groups now, but whenever you start talking about effects of the individual responses, that's when things can get even more difficult. I'm running out of time. I'll continue to make videos for you guys. Keep up the good work and send me email questions when you have questions on this stuff, and I will do my best to simplify and kind of clarify some of these things. Thank you.